You are welcome to today's episode of Formula for Everyday with the Formula Law.
Hi, welcome to Formula for Everyday podcast. I am your host, Lawrence Nkwacha, the Formula Law. So today we're going to be looking at a very interesting topic. That's because we're going to be starting a new book, and this book is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This book has been a very huge part of my growing up. I've been with this book for a number of years, and I've been reading it yearly to see how I could adjust in my principles and become more effective as a person. So I'm going to be sharing with you an overview of the introduction, which is titled Paradigms and Principles. As I mentioned earlier, the book is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. I would recommend this book to everybody, so you could go and visit your favorite bookstore and also make this book part of your personal library. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. There is no real excellence in all the world which can be separated from right living. So the way you live your life can determine if you would actually achieve an excellent life or a life of a mediocre. So there is no real excellence in life that can be separated from right living. And this quote came from David Starr Jordan. It's part of an opening statement in this part 1, which is Paradigms and Principles. So our perception is what really shapes our behaviors, how we perceive the world, how we see the world. There's a profound statement I read. He said, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. What we are communicates more far eloquently than anything we say or do. So what you are communicates far eloquently. Someone will say character is like smoke. So what you are is far more important than what you say or do as a person. So he went further to explain that paradigms are models, theories, perception, assumption, or frame of reference in terms of sight, but in terms of perceiving, understanding, interpreting, and also seeing certain things. So as I mentioned earlier, this part is paradigms and principles. And we must understand that paradigms are like models that we get to see certain things, or it's just a laid out structure, or you could choose to call it a laid out model on how we see things. So talking about paradigm in this chapter is just a paradigm of how life should be. A principle is just a piece of information that tells us what should be or what is ideal for every situation. So paradigms and principles are generally how God tends to rule the entire earth. Like I heard in church today, you see, the entire earth is more than 8 billion people, and it cannot be governed just by prayers. Prayers is very important, and every other religious activity that we tend to do, just in case you are a religious person. But what is even more important is the principles we follow, because there are principles that if you do it, whether you pray or not, you are certainly going to get results. To try to change outward attitudes and behavior does very little in the long run. So what is even more important is to change your character, is to change what you are, not just your attitudes, not just your behaviors. So if you are aware of your paradigms, if you are aware of your mindset, if you are aware of the underpinnings of what makes you believe what you believe, why exactly do you believe what you believe? Why exactly do you behave the way you do? I mean, what shapes your ideology about life? What shapes your ideology about getting perhaps becoming successful? How you define yourself? Like, what do you actually define as right or wrong? So the more you begin to shape your basic paradigms, the things that really make you interested, what is your center, what is your core as a person. So as you begin to shape your basic paradigms and become more aware of them, that will help you to listen better to other people, like how you be going through this book with me, or you could even get the book for yourself and read it. That's like listening to somebody else to know what they think, and you'll be able to deduce a more objective view. You'll be able to see the world from someone else's lens. You'll be able to see the world from someone else's perspective and compare this to yours in order to be able to get what right living is like, in order to be able to get the excellence out of life.
You are still listening to Formula for Every Day with the Formula Law. Stay tuned.
So the character ethic is based on the fundamental idea that principles govern human effectiveness. So the character ethic, that's what I was saying, it's not just about changing your outward behaviors and attitude. It's about changing your character, who you really are. Who are you when you are alone in a room? Perhaps we spend most of our times alone, like either you are asleep, thinking about like trying to reorder your mind in order to rest and also dream. Okay, so most of the time we spend it alone. Even if you tend to be very busy and you spend more time with people, your real you manifest when you become, or you are seated alone in a room, or you're seated alone just by yourself. So who are you at that point? What is your real character? So while practices are situationally specific, principles are deep fundamental truths that have universal application. Principles have universal application. They are what makes us to understand how the universe is being ordered. Take for instance, a principle is sowing and reaping. So if you are a farmer, or you are not even a farmer, yes, if you pick a seed under the right conditions of the soil and you water the seed, it will miraculously grow, and it can even miraculously grow into a tree. Now, fact being that you don't need to even pray for that seed to grow, but what actually happens in the ground is a miracle. Okay, but it's because you have been able to do the principle of sowing. You will certainly reap under the right conditions. So he came with a very wonderful perspective by saying that the way we see the problem is a problem. Now, a problem is not really the problem until our perception is defaulted, or our perception is set to see the problem as a problem. So he now went further to make this quote from Albert Einstein when he said, "The significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them." Albert Einstein. Inside Out first means to start with your paradigms, your character, and your motives. So if you really want to change and become an effective person, the starting point is with your paradigms, with your character, and with your motives. If you want the secondary greatness of recognized talent, focus first on the primary talent and greatness of character. Private victories always precede public victories. Making and keeping promises to ourselves precedes making and keeping promises to others. So this is a very powerful statement. Making and keeping promises to yourself. I told myself I'm going to do this podcast every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. I have to first of all keep that promise to myself before I keep the promises to my audience, which I'm doing right now. So making and keeping promises to yourself, it precedes making and keeping promises to others. So he made a very profound statement. He said, "We must not cease from exploration, and the end of our exploring will be to arrive where we began and to know the place for the first time." So exploration, what it simply means is you should be a lifelong learner. Even when you come across things you've learned before, let it look new to you. Let your mind still be open to learn something new, even from what you are already familiar with. So be a lifelong learner, be a lifelong student, so that you have more knowledge, you have more perspective, you have more passion to be able to direct your mind in a way that is going to be effective and beneficial, not just to you, but to people around you, to your family, to your friends, to your siblings. So with this, I've come to the end of today's edition of Formula for Everyday podcast. I remain your host, Lawrence Nkwocha. So until I come your way again on Tuesday, bye for now.
This podcast holds every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. Thank you for listening to today's Roadside. Hope you learned something new. I would like you to join in on the next episode.